I've got with me here Brian Cushing from historic Locust Grove down in Louisville, Kentucky. I wanted to have a deeper discussion today about what's happening, how you feel about interpreting living history in the world today. You know, it's like living history had its kind of heyday or the startup in the 70s and 80s, but we live in a different era now.
We do, and I hear a lot of people saying that it's dying. I don't think it is. I think it's changing forms a little bit, and I think the form that we see it going in as far as interested in museums and interested in the living history side of things is people are very interested in in-depth topics. Our visitors at Locust Grove, they might want to know about anything. And a lot of times they want to know about how we know what we know. And of course my answer to that a lot of times is, well, we make an argument based on evidence and we'll change that argument based on new evidence. Right. And so that complicates living history, and it makes it a very, incorporating it into a museum program makes it a very heavy responsibility because it's not just about the narrative anymore. Any aspect of what you're doing, what you're saying, could be something that somebody comes in with a very deep interest in. And so when we train our folks, we try to be sure that anything possible that we can have researched, documented, implemented is ready to go for those guests. That the answers, if they're appropriate to be there for them, that those answers are there for them. And the great thing that I think we've seen with a lot of our folks, and that I see in a lot of other living history groups these days, is everybody latches on their own specialty. You know, and so it's like it could be like a skill or something. You know, we've got one of our guys is a bookbinder. You know, so and everybody can latch on and specialize in that skill, and then bring it to the group and make the whole more whole. Basically, make it a more whole look at history.
So the concept is a little like the idea of a video game that took you through the path and you just have to do these little puzzles along the way, versus it's a world that you can discover, right? You can go into every corner and there's something there. Right,
exactly. And like I say, it's not just about the stories anymore. And for a lot of people, I know it never was. And for some people it still is, and that's definitely important, but it's about the nitty gritty. And one of my favorite things to see with living history at Locust Grove is we try not to beat people over the head with it. As far as the story, we try to let them have that joy of discovery, and that gives them a kind of an ownership, I think, of the experience that they're having. And so one of my personal favorite things is when we're doing an event that might really not have anything to do with the mission of the site. You know, we might be selling antiques, we might be selling plants, you know, something like that, which are great events. But with living history, people can come around the corner and they can kind of catch a glimpse of something, and they get curious and they go and they start to question it, and they get drawn into not just what is going on there, but then the whole story of the site. And then they might come there for another reason, but they're drawn into, you know, the point of why we're there.
Right. I think it's typical of people today to to have niche interests. And so you're both doing that from the interpreter side. Oh, I'm an interpreter. I have a niche interest. I want to get involved, and I want to get deep in this particular topic. And the guest who comes in, and they have those same kind of niche interests, and they kind of connect.
Yeah, or like I say, it's a lot about they get interested in the nitty gritty, and even if it wasn't something they might have even considered before, just the fact that they're seeing and they get to experience a little bit of these rhythms of life in the past. And I think interpreting life in the past is very much about rhythm, just because it's so much different than the way we live today. It's something that just really, in general, I think appeals to people from what I've seen. Yeah.
How do you deal with that in the training process? So you've apparently you've been there at Historic Locust Grove long enough to say, oh, we used to do things like this, now we do things.
Right. Well, everybody has a base. Well, as far as like the living history folks, for the first person interpreters, and then we also have history trades. For the first person interpreters, everybody does have a baseline level of training that they have to go through. They have to pass an audition process first, and then they do have baseline training. I mean, they are being representatives of the museum, so what they're presenting is important. Statistically, the museums are one of the most trusted sources of historical information by the American public, so we take it very seriously. And so there are certain baseline things they have to do. Once they get into the program, they do have to tour the site with me or with the executive director, somebody who's information that we trust. So at least they have that kind of base of information. They have to train in personal appearance. They have to train in physical characterization and character development. So it's not enough to just be thinking about your character, you actually have to be able to present that to the public and develop your character responsibly. And then we have a variety of continuing education workshops. And at that point, that's, I think, when we're really trying to identify what these areas of specialization and special interest might be, and then hopefully give those people and encourage those people with the tools to really develop that further. And again, develop the program in ways that we never conceived of when we first did that. What our volunteers, and these are all volunteers, what they have all done blows my mind. Every year they take it to another level, and I don't take credit for that, for the level that they've taken it to. It's just the people that they are and the dedication that they have to the story and the site.
Well, I don't know. You want to say, oh, it's not about, it's all on them, and I think part of that is. How you have leadership in that situation, because people follow leaders, and if leaders are really, really interested, then they'll follow along with that, and that sort of teamwork and sort of not competition, but sort of competition between people. So I can imagine that year after year, you get people interested, and they just drive the interest in other people.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very it's a mutually supportive group. It's like we make a point of making sure that it's a safe space. If we see for all the other volunteers, like you're going to screw up, screw up here.
Right,
we'll take care of it, and any signs that that's not the case get dealt with, pretty quickly. Right.
And it isn't one of those, oh, you've messed up in one here, you're out. Unless that's your mindset issue. You
right.
Talked about how. Talk about that idea of volunteers, and it's like, oh, you can't fire me because I'm a volunteer.
Right, that's absolutely not true. We can, but it's not a pleasant thing to have to do, and it doesn't happen very often. But we have a responsibility to the guests that come through Locust Grove. We have a responsibility to the other volunteers who are there with us, and so there is a level of excellence that's expected. And now that doesn't mean that you can't fall on your face, pick yourself back up. It's mostly, and we very seldom have turned anybody away. It's just, it's a matter of you do have to be able to live up to the integrity of the institution. And we tell everybody too, as far as first-person interpretation goes, it is not for everybody. It's its own special brand of volunteering, of interpretation and things like that. I'm not always in the mood to do it, quite honestly. But we try for some of those folks. It's like we try to help them find another place in the museum because at a place like Locust Grove, we've got a place for just about everybody, pretty much. And one of the things that we're dealing with right now is one thing that we're about to launch is we really need some plainclothes folks who are just interested in telling the story. At special events and things like that. Especially people who are available on the weekends, just like first-person interpreters are, but maybe they're not into wearing funny clothes. Right. Taking on a character.
Guests need to be able to interact with lots of different kinds of people, and some guests, it's like, oh, I can't interact with the first person.
Right. Absolutely.
Interpreter.
Yeah.
You really need to have someone standing by that can be, an interpreter for you.
Well, yeah, and the other thing is too, it's like when you're dealing with somebody who is, for us, is 1816. When they're in 1816 and that's their world and they can't step outside of that, sometimes they need some context. And so that's one thing. We've got some great docents, what do you call them, docents, tour guides. We've got some great folks who are really great about working with us on keeping an eye out for those kinds of things, of when a guest might be getting a little bit lost, with what's going on. At least one case, there was a guest that was starting to get a little bit make some of the ladies uncomfortable. It was able to swoop in and take those people to another area. So it's a crucial part of the process, and it really at a site like ours, it doesn't work without that. And so just because first-person interpretation is not what is right for you doesn't mean we don't need you at the museum.
So how often do you do? Obviously you're not doing first person, 24/7.
Right. Yeah.
How often are you having programs that involve first-person interpretation there?
I would say at least once a month. Again, the way this particular group has developed, it's we are heavily reliant on people who are either in school or working during the day, which is a somewhat different demographic than we largely saw in some other volunteer areas. And so that's been kind of interesting. So these are folks that are mostly available on evenings and weekends. They can't really do during the week. And so, yeah, you're not going to see it during the week a whole lot, but whenever we have a special event, again, whether it's historical in nature or not, we try to incorporate that as a way to kind of get our story across to the guests who come to see us. We do have a couple of events that are focused on first-person interpretation. July 4th is inching towards being the favorite. This all started around Christmas, but a lot of the folks really like the July 4th thing.
When it's nice and hot down there.
It's nice and hot. Yeah, you really get to feel those wool clothes, you know. So, but it's our free day. It's open to the public, and so we see people who come through Locust Grove who we don't usually see. It's just finding something neat to do on the 4th of July, and we recreate a 4th of July celebration in 1816, and that was and it's something they did. You know, it was a patriotic day, and so that's gotten to be a great thing. We do multiple readings of the Declaration of Independence throughout the day. It's very popular. I didn't know how that would go, but people are really interested in seeing that. And then our Christmas event is our other big one. And we really try to focus on Christmas in the federal period, which is much different from Christmas in the Victorian period, which causes some confusion. And it's worth kind of pointing out the evolution, I think, of that concept.
So how long have you been doing living history?
19 years.
19 years.
Yeah, I showed up at Locust Grove in November of 1999 as a volunteer.
So as you've been doing it for almost 2 decades, how have you felt like what the evolution of the change of living history?
It's because I didn't just I showed up at Locust Grove, and that's where it's kind of been my home base. Like, well, before I worked there, I did stuff in Revolutionary War reenacting and the War of 1812 and dipped my toes into Civil War a little bit. I mean, I really like the mid-19th century. I think we're seeing a shift, just like the shift that we're talking about. I don't think it's as much about the focus on big battles, big camps, things like that. And not that one's better than the other or anything like that, but I know for me, a lot of folks my age, I'm inching into my late 30s now. But it seems like we were talking about earlier, it's like we're really interested in skills and the rhythms of daily life in the past. And I think the focus is shifting that way. It's kind of, like I said, I could be wrong, this is just what I see around the community that I'm in, but I think it's shifting more into a civilian versus military direction in some ways, at least, in the 18th into mid-19th century, maybe.
Right. I think military things can really draw people in, especially at a particular age. And then later on, wait, I'm interested in what life, whole life is like, not just this one little segment that might be exciting with big booms and all that.
Well, and what I try to drive home too, and we're talking we have a Revolutionary War reenactment last full weekend of October every year at Locust Grove, and the battle is the money shot, and so it's like I don't want to lose that at all because I mean people come specifically to see that, and then they get drawn into the broader world. Right.
It's a nexus of action and interest. Yeah. And, where technology happens and all that stuff. It's an important part of what's going on. Yeah. They are the milestones that we can lock down. Yeah. But real life that's happening in between those, I think, is what people want to learn about after the fact.
Right. Yeah.
What do you think are some of the hidden things that aren't being done yet?
Oh, that's
where you want to dig in a decade?
That's a good question because it seems like there's always a surprise with what somebody comes off with. And I think that you guys show a lot of this on this channel when you go out and find these folks who have these skills and things like that. And I think for me, it's just the point is just to keep digging deeper and to be open and excited about having been wrong. And it's like, you can be discouraged when you find that out, or you can be excited about being able to take it one step further. So, okay, well, I hadn't gotten it quite there yet. I can take it one step further because I've got this information now. And in the internet age, the internet has good things and bad things about it. Right. But it certainly has. And I've seen, like I say, 20 years is not that long compared to some other people that I know who have been doing this stuff. But over the course of those 19 years, I've seen there's just so much more documentation that we have access to now that we just plain didn't. And then knowing what to do with that documentation is another skill. But it's like the information is there. And hopefully that continues, because one thing that just blows my mind is finding a museum another museum that's put their collections online and digitized it and things like that we didn't see a year ago.
And stuff that you find that they don't even show in their
Right.
museum. You know,
Yeah.
oh, this is the back room
Yeah.
that we're digitizing, and you know, a whole new world opens up. with that
Yeah.
thing.
And sometimes that's some of the most fun stuff.
Yeah, I think part of it is also being open. I think many people want to. It's like, no, I've got my thing set. I'm done.
Right.
You know, I've finished. Right.
Right.
I'm going to present this finished thing, and we don't live in that finished world. We never.
Exactly.
We're never finished.
Right.
With what we keep digging.
And I think that's the real point is we keep digging and we keep working.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, Brian, thank you. Thank you for this kind of deeper discussion of this. It's always fun to get together with you.
Well, thank you
and
for
talk
having me,
about
yeah.
historical stuff. So
Great to see
thanks
you.
so much.